So I
Um,
guess, Dakarai, I think that's what childhood, I would say that's when your journey began, right? Of
yeah.
being an artist?
Hmm. Hmm.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It started with drawing, and then I went to like graffiti art, and then from graffiti art to fashion, and fashion to illustration, and then once I got bored of all that, then I discovered collage in my early 20s.
And then what is your current art business and why do you do it?
Currently what I'm doing is like freelance illustration. I do a lot of work with companies like New York Times. I've worked with Google, Netflix, the New Yorker, and several others. But like, yeah, I pretty much do stuff like that full time. To where like the collage work that I'll do is like it'll like accompany like articles and stuff like that, or like like for advertising and stuff. So yeah, I do that full time now. I actually left my full-time job in December to just do solidly that. So
Wow, how long were you doing art and your full-time job before you left your full-time job?
3.5 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
And then, so what do you think the impact you have with your art? Like, what is the impact you have with your art?
um I would hope that the impact I have with my art is making people um, more comfortable with their identity, because that's something that I touch on a lot in my work, is like the identity of Black people in America, because like there's always these strong stereotypes, and then like there's different ideologies and things like that that we put on ourselves that might not be 100% our own. So I try and reflect that through my work, and I hope that my impact is inspiring others to find out what that is for themselves.
What is art to you?
Art to me actually is like a language, and this is something I feel like I've only recently started to understand. It's because it's another form of communicating. Like, I know for me that art has been a form of communication for me, because like I don't know if you could tell from me talking right now, but like I am not a public speaker. Like I really don't like doing stuff like this at all. Like I feel like I get my message across so much better visually. So it's like I'm communicating with others without words, but through creativity and imagery.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. There are things that are said and expressed creatively through art
Mhm.
that an individual will have a hard time expressing, but they would, and I know this because your artwork speaks so loudly. And if you ladies ever get a chance, please check out his work because it just tells a story, and people connect with it in many different ways. And there's always something that will grab your attention that will connect you with what he's portraying. And I think that's where we get into authenticity. Do you feel that authenticity is important in art?
It's very important, because your art is your language, and especially people who are deeply into art and like sensitive to things like that, they can tell when it's not authentic. And I think that takes away from the experience of getting to know an artist and their craft. Like, cause like every piece that you make is a piece of you. So authenticity is very important when it comes to that, because like you're not here to necessarily tell someone else's story creatively or whatever. You're telling your own.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, how do you emulate this?
Um, I feel like I emulate it by pulling from my I try really hard to be completely original. I know a lot of people say that um true artists steal or whatever the quote is. I forget what the quote is or whatever, but like me personally, I try my hardest to find my whole authentic 100% voice through creativity. And it takes a lot to do that. And one of the things that I do to make sure that I do that is that I actually am not someone that looks at other people's art as much as you would think. Like I make all these collages and stuff like that, and I have friends and followers who may send me a collage artist that they think I might like, but actually I'm not really so much of a fan of other collage
Oh,
artists.
wow.
I don't like to look at it because I don't want it to influence um, my own work.
And that was my next question. What's the difference between imitation and inspiration?
Yeah, there is like inspiration is one thing, because like you can take someone else's idea a step forward with your own view, but like imitation is like you trying to mimic the same impact that someone else had, or the same view that someone else has in perspective and all those things. So um yeah, I mean, and that's not to say that I never look at other people's art or whatever. I definitely earlier on in my journey is like growing as an artist, I definitely used to emulate my favorite artists, but once I finally found my groove, I kind of just cut that out to where it's like I'm like most of my influences comes from the music that I listen to, and not the artists that I admire. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love the gorilla.
Some of my favorite artists, you would never know that they were my favorite artists because it doesn't look anything like what I do at all.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, for sure. I like the gorillas. So what do you see in your creations that is unique or specific to you?
Um, that's unique and specific to me. Um, I have to think about that. Well, okay, so I think that when I have seen other collage artists work, I noticed that there's not as much emphasis on composition. It's more of putting together um, a bunch of different images and things like that. But like as part of my process, um, composition is one of the biggest and most important things, because if you look at my collages, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell unless I told you, but I don't necessarily think about the images that I'm putting together. It's more of what fits together, like what builds the silhouette that I'm actually looking for. So like the shape and all that is something that is very important to me. And I personally don't know that that's something that other collage artists consider. Um, and then also my use of color with what I do. I think that's like a staple of mine. People recognize my work from how colorful it is and how the color matching is and stuff like that, which is really crazy because I went to art school and I failed color theory so hard. Like it was my
Oh,
worst. Color theory was absolutely not the class for me, but I think I started to hone in on that from my experience with fashion, just like matching colors and patterns and stuff like that together. So it ended up playing a role in what I do now.
well, you could have fooled me because you use some popping colors and it
Yeah.
just goes so cohesively with what you're putting together in the collage. Do
Mhm.
you have any tips or resources that you'd like to share with us?
Tips or resources? I guess in order for me to ask that question, I would need to know what everyone else's goals are. Like, what are you guys into? Excuse me saying guys, what are you all into? And what are your goals?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mhm.
Who wants to answer that? We can go around and answer that. Hannah?
Hi. I guess for me is being able to make all my money just off my art, because like I'm also working at another job and then also doing my art on the side. And I'm curious, I guess, how you manage to migrate, I guess, from a full-time regular job to
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. I had been building and I basically turned my Instagram account into a portfolio without even realizing that's what I was doing. I think what happened was well, one thing is that like my Instagram is very organized and thought out. So I think that was just attractive to art directors and stuff like that. So once I landed one big job, I think I just got on all the other art directors' radar. Like last January was when I did my first like big commission piece. I did 2 pieces for New York Times. And once that published, I started getting emails from art directors like every week, every month or whatever. So it just became a consistent flow, but I think that it was because of the presentation that I put together on my Instagram. Like it's, I took my Instagram account from being kind of like halfway personal to like all professional and all that. So yeah, it just became attractive to art directors and things like that. So yeah, that's a really important thing to do.
That was a good question, Hannah. Thank you. Anyone else have a question along that line? Actually, Dakarai had a question for you guys. So who wants to go next? Alyssa?
Yeah, I think, well, I also have to do as well as Hannah. But when Ben sent your link, I like quickly just kind of like skimmed through your work, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's so like fun and like playful while like, you know, also talking about like different issues. I guess the question I have is how you balance like that play while also like, you know, doing it as work, even though like, you know, it's art and it's fun. Like, how do you
Yeah.
manage that?
I guess the simple short answer is just that the work stuff, like once the work stuff is done, I'm still every time I sit down at my desk and work on something, I'm practicing. So the play stuff is like practice for the work stuff, and then even the work stuff is like, you know, basically vice versa, to where, you know, everything is all practice. I'm always challenging myself, trying to learn new ways of doing things. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Jackie? Jackie, you with us?
I'm here. Sorry, my phone's going in and out. I mean, the question I had you pretty much answered is like, how do you go from that full-time work to getting more full-time involved into your art?
It's kind of difficult to explain because it's like the downside to it is that there's trends in what these companies want. And I, like, you know, as a collage artist, I feel like what I'm doing is very niche. So it's very niche and very specific. So there's waves of it to where it's like it's like completely successful. Honestly, earlier this year was this year was looking like it was like, well, no, it still was, even though I had a big pitfall. This was still the most successful year I've had as a full-time artist. I don't want to like put a figure out there or whatever, but just like to like it's like a ballpark. Like when I left my job in December, by March, I had made the amount that I would have made if I would have stayed for this whole year, just in
Wow.
those 4 months. But then like
Wow,
the
that's awesome.
the really scary downside of that is that like I was saying, it's what I do is very niche. And there's not always like a need for the style of art that I do. So other people were starting to get more jobs, and then things started happening in the world where, like, you know, the economy took a huge hit. The and believe it or not, the war with Russia and Ukraine definitely affected what I was doing. So like I would say after about April, the jobs just almost completely stopped coming in. So like I began to struggle really, really hard, probably like honestly up until like last week. I had maybe, you know, in between those months, I maybe had a few jobs here and there, and then I was like struggling, trying to figure out how else I'm gonna make money. And then like literally like last week, I just started seeing a little bit more of an influx of jobs.
See,
So
I think that's the part that scares me the most is I'm afraid to take one step into another because I'd be afraid that there's not enough income for me to keep doing what I want to do.
yeah, my advice, which is what I learned during these dark times, is that even if you are doing this full time, you definitely still need something else, some other stream of income. I'm trying to figure out what that is for myself right now because I don't necessarily want to go back to work. I'm so used to not having a boss now that like I don't know that I can go back to that. But still trying to find something else that can take over if the other thing isn't doing so well is very important.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a good question. How do you maneuver, you know, the highs and lows as an artist? And yeah, what happens globally does impact every single person that's trying to make a living as
Yeah.
an independent artist, for
Mm.
sure.
Mhm.
Valeria, did you want to add to this before we go for our breakout?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when did you know that you stumbled upon the medium that you felt most comfortable in? Like, did you bounce around or did you always feel comfortable with collage?
This is kind of a long answer, and I'm glad you asked the question too. So I found collage, it's 2022. I found collage about 10 years ago. I had never ever even looked at collage as a medium the way that I do it. But back in like the earlier social media days when Tumblr was huge, I was following other artists, and I came across a couple of collage artists, and I saw what they were doing. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I kind of want to give that a try. And once I tried it out, I immediately fell in love with it. And then like, you know, over time, as I'm finding my groove with it, I'm finding how it actually plays really well with my personality. Because one of the major things about me is I'm a very impatient person. So like, you know, back when I was painting, I would do paintings and stuff like that. I could I could be working on a painting for 2 weeks to a month, and like that's for me that was like really long. It's like like the satisfaction takes too long to come about. But like with collage, with what I do, at least the way that I make collages, it may take me 30 minutes to an hour max to make a collage, depending on what it is. So it's like I would see results quicker. And then yeah, so like that plays into like my impatience, but also I'm a collector. I love collecting things. I have a huge collection of vinyl records, and then like vinyl figures and stuff like that. But also as a collage artist, you have to collect material to make collage. So I also have a huge collection of photo books and magazines and stuff like that as well. And then there's like certain types that I try to get. So like my the magazines that I get are typically between the early 1900s to at the most recent that I'll go is maybe like the early 90s. I don't like to use anything past that because there's like an obvious flip to when print or like the photography went from film to digital. And like I really love to use what was shot with film because there's so much more texture to it. So yeah, it's just like all of that kind of played into like my personality, like things that I look for and all that, and like things that work for who I am as a person.
That's good to know because I always noticed the texture and I wondered how you did it,
Hmm.
with your collage work. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's old material.
So is there anything the group can do for you?
I guess just keep your eye on what I do. Right now I don't have anything specific to promote because I'm very much so into like the commercial side of my career at the moment. I just got done doing my projects. I released my third art book in November called Cave Years. And then I also did I did my first gallery showing in 3 years. I did this past June. So
Wow.
like after that, right now I'm just like trying to focus on getting this career to be a bit more stable.
Thank you.
Hmm. Thank you.
How was the gallery showing? How did you displayed how many pieces?
Oh, I displayed, I want to say 11 pieces.
Wow.
It was pretty good. I think we sold 4 pieces, 4 or 5. And then my book that I did in November had officially sold out at the exhibit. And yeah, it was a good turnout. The opening was a good turnout. Unfortunately, I caught COVID
Mm.
the week, or I caught COVID 2 or 3 days before the closing event, so I wasn't even able to attend my own closing.
So you
Uh,
sold all 11 pieces?
no, I sold 4 or 5.
Wow, but that's
4.
still good.
Mhm,
Wow.
mhm.
Okay, so now we're gonna take a